At dinner, Dad raised his glass. "Congrats. Here's your car keys, son." Then he looked at me. "Rent's due. $800 by Sunday. You're an adult now." I asked. "Why do I pay while he gets rewarded?" He said, "Because he's worth it." Those 4 words shattered everything I thought I knew about family. That night I packed quietly and left a note on the fridge explaining why I wouldn't be coming back. I never expected the chaos that followed. My brother's panic texts, my mom's hysterical voicemails, and my dad calling every number he had trying to find me. But some bridges once burned light the way forward. I'm Alana, 22 years old, and halfway through nursing school. Since turning 18, I've been working part-time at a local clinic, while taking classes handing over a portion of every paycheck to help with household expenses. Meanwhile, my younger brother Jake, who just graduated high school, has never had to work a day in his life. That's how it's always been in our family. Jake was the golden child, the son my father Mark always wanted. I was the afterthought, the obligation. Mom Sarah noticed the difference in treatment, but never stood up to Dad about it. She'd offer private consolations when Dad's favoritism became too obvious, but never actually intervened. The pattern started early. When Jake wanted to play baseball at age 8, Dad bought him top-of-the-line equipment without hesitation. When I needed new school supplies that same year, Dad told me to use what I had left from the previous year. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Alana," he'd say right before spending hundreds on Jake's hobbies. For my 10th birthday, I got a small family dinner and a practical gift, new sneakers because I'd outgrown my old ones. 2 months later, Jake's birthday featured a backyard party with 20 kids, a hired magician, and a mountain of presents. When I asked Mom why Jake's birthday was so much bigger than mine, she just said, "That's how your father wants it." By high school, I'd accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I poured myself into academics, thinking maybe achievements would finally earn Dad's approval. I graduated valedictorian while working weekends. Dad attended my graduation, but spent most of it talking about Jake's baseball tournament scheduled for the next day. College was where the disparity became impossible to ignore. Despite my scholarships, Dad insisted I needed student loans because the family just can't afford it right now. He made comments about how nursing was at least a practical career choice, not hiding his disappointment that I hadn't aimed higher. All through my first years of nursing school, I kept trying to prove myself. I made Dean's List every semester. I secured competitive clinical placements. I worked extra shifts to contribute more to the household, thinking maybe then Dad would see my value. I was exhausted but hopeful that eventually my efforts would pay off. The truth hit me like a truck one ordinary Tuesday. I was looking for some tax forms Dad needed me to sign related to my student loans. While searching his home office desk, I found documents for a college fund in Jake's name with over $50,000 in it. Dad had been adding to it regularly for years, even during times he claimed we were struggling financially and I needed to work more hours. In that moment, staring at those papers, something broke inside me. All those years of thinking, if I just tried harder, achieved more, contributed more, Dad would finally see me as equal to Jake. But it was never about what I did or didn't do. The account had been growing while I worked double shifts and took out loans. The family could afford college, just not for me. I put everything back exactly as I found it and never mentioned my discovery. But from that day forward, something changed. I started saving more of my money instead of contributing extra to the household. I began making quiet plans for a future where I wouldn't need to beg for scraps of approval. I just didn't know how soon I'd be putting those plans into action. Jake's high school graduation was approaching, and despite our strained relationship, I wanted to acknowledge his achievement. I worked double shifts for a month to save up for a nice gift, a high-end laptop he'd need for college. I spent hours researching the best model, making sure it had all the features he'd want for his business major. The day before graduation, Dad announced we'd be having a special dinner at Morton's Steakhouse, the most expensive restaurant in town. I immediately started calculating if I had enough in my account to cover my portion, as Dad had made it clear years ago that I was expected to pay for myself at family celebrations. "Don't worry about the bill tomorrow," Dad said, noticing my expression. "This is Jake's night. I'm covering everyone." For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe things were changing. Maybe Dad was finally seeing us as a family unit rather than Jake and his supporting cast. The restaurant was elegant, with white tablecloths and soft lighting. Jake arrived last, soaking up the congratulations from the hostess, when Mom proudly announced he was the graduate we were celebrating. I noticed nobody had ever made such announcements for my college achievements. We ordered drinks and Dad stood raising his glass in a toast. To Jake, who's made us proud every single day. Son, you're going to take the business world by storm. And to help you on that journey, he pulled out a small box and slid it across the table. Jake opened it, his eyes widening at the car key inside. The Jeep Wrangler you've been wanting, Dad confirmed, beaming. It's parked at home waiting for you. Jake jumped up to hug Dad while Mom dabbed at her eyes. I sat silently calculating the cost of a new Jeep in my head and coming up with a figure that represented about 2 years of my salary. After the excitement died down, Dad turned to me. His expression shifted from beaming pride to business-like seriousness. Alana, rent's going up starting this month. $800 due Sunday. You're an adult now with a steady income. Time to contribute properly. The shift in tone gave me conversational whiplash. $800. That's double what I've been paying. That's the market rate for a room in this area, Dad replied. And we're covering Jake's full apartment rent at college, so the household budget needs adjusting. My carefully maintained composure cracked. So Jake gets a free apartment and a new car for graduating high school, while I get a rent increase, despite working and being in nursing school. The table fell silent. Jake looked uncomfortable. Mom stared at her plate, and Dad's expression hardened. Why do I pay while he gets rewarded? I pressed, unable to stop myself. Dad's answer was immediate and delivered without hesitation. Because he's worth it. 4 simple words that confirmed every insecurity I'd ever felt. Mom gasped. Mark, you don't mean that. I'm just being honest, Dad replied, not breaking eye contact with me. Jake is investing in a real future. Business degree, connections, potential. He needs the support now to build something substantial. Alana's choice is different. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I barely tasted the expensive steak I'd been looking forward to. I nodded mechanically when appropriate, but inside I was replaying those words over and over. Because he's worth it. After we got home, I waited until Jake was showing Mom some feature of his new Jeep before approaching Dad in his study. Can we talk about what happened at dinner? I asked. Dad sighed, looking irritated. There's nothing to discuss. You asked a question, I gave you an honest answer. So I'm really worth less to you than Jake is. Don't be dramatic, Alana. This isn't about worth as a person. It's about investment and return. Jake is going into business. He'll take over my company someday. He's going to build real wealth, have a real career. You're just going to end up as a nurse marrying some local guy. Different paths, different levels of support. I stood there stunned by the casual cruelty. Now about the rent increase, he continued, opening his desk drawer. I'll need it in cash or check by Sunday. As he shuffled papers in his drawer, a folder fell to the floor, spilling its contents. I automatically bent to help gather them, freezing when I recognized what I was holding. Bank statements for accounts I'd never seen before. Dad snatched them from my hands, but not before I saw enough. Not only had he maintained a separate college fund for Jake all these years, but he'd also set up investment accounts in Jake's name. The amounts listed made my student loan debt seem trivial by comparison. Those are private, he snapped. Those are family funds you claimed we didn't have, I replied. My voice surprisingly steady, despite the storm inside me. You told me we couldn't afford my tuition. You made me take out loans. Family priorities, Alana. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made, but they're only tough for me, aren't they? Never for Jake. Dad didn't bother denying it. Sunday, $800. He turned back to his desk, conversation over. I walked out of his study knowing I would never give him another dime. The morning after the disastrous graduation dinner, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog of seeking approval had lifted, replaced by ice-cold determination. I would no longer be the family afterthought, the one who paid for the privilege of being treated as less. I had 3 days until Dad's rent deadline. 3 days to completely change my life. First, I assessed my finances. I'd been quietly saving for the past year ever since finding Jake's college fund documents. It wasn't much, $6,000, but it was something. My job at the clinic paid bi-weekly, and a check had just cleared. I had partial scholarships for tuition, but I'd need to figure out housing and living expenses. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done before. Then I started making calls, beginning with my academic advisor at nursing school. I need to discuss emergency housing options, I explained. Family situation has become untenable. By midday, I had information on temporary student housing, the process for updating my financial aid to reflect my new independent status, and a list of resources for students in crisis. Next was housing. I spent hours online searching for apartments, making calls explaining my situation in the vaguest terms possible. Most places wanted proof of income, 3 times the rent amount, security deposits, and long leases. But by the end of the day, I'd found a tiny studio apartment on the other side of town. It was above a garage, barely 500 square feet, with a kitchenette and shared laundry facilities. The landlady, Mrs. Perez, was willing to be flexible on the deposit when I explained I was a nursing student leaving a difficult family situation. My son is a doctor now, she told me. But it wasn't easy for him getting there. Sometimes family doesn't understand the healthcare path. You can move in Saturday if you need to. On the second day, I went to work as usual, but spoke to my supervisor during lunch. Jeanette, I need to increase my hours if possible. I'm moving out on my own and will have additional expenses. Jeanette, who had always been supportive of my balancing work and school, didn't ask many questions. We could use help on weekend overnight shifts. Time and a half pay, and it's usually quieter, so you might even get some studying done. By the end of the day, I had a new schedule that would increase my income by about 30%. It would make my school schedule more challenging, but I'd figure it out. I always did. At home, I maintained my normal routine. I made dinner for the family as usual, listened to Jake talk about his college plans, nodded at Dad's business stories. But when everyone went to bed, I started quietly sorting my possessions, deciding what was essential and what could be replaced later. On the third day, I went to the bank and opened a new account at a different institution from the one my parents used. I transferred my savings and updated my direct deposit information for work. I arranged for my mail to be forwarded to a P.O. box I rented near my new apartment. I made sure my important documents, birth certificate, social security card, medical records, time, were gathered and secure. That afternoon, I went to the financial aid office at my nursing school to update my status. The counselor looked concerned as I explained my situation in clinical terms. Family support withdrawn, need to reassess aid options as an independent student. While waiting for the counselor to return with some forms, I noticed a stack of mail in the return to sender bin on the desk. A familiar logo caught my eye. It was from the Seattle Grace Nursing Excellence Program, an elite nursing education opportunity I'd applied to months ago, but never heard back from. The letter was addressed to me. With a quick glance to make sure no one was watching, I slid the envelope from the pile and into my bag. Something told me this was important. At home that evening, I locked myself in the bathroom and opened the letter with shaking hands. It was an acceptance letter to the prestigious program dated 3 months earlier. Full scholarship, housing stipend, career placement assistance, everything I'd dreamed of. The letter mentioned they were following up on previous correspondence and were sorry to have not received my response to their offer. They had given my spot to another candidate, but wanted to keep me on their list for future opportunities. I never received the original acceptance letter. Someone had intercepted it, and there was only one person who regularly collected the mail in our house. My father had hidden my acceptance letter. He had deliberately prevented me from taking an opportunity that would have changed my life, that would have freed me from dependence on him. At dinner that night, I studied him across the table. This man who had shaped so much of my self-perception. Had he hidden the letter because he didn't want me to move away? Because he needed my rent money? Or simply because he couldn't stand the idea of me succeeding beyond the limited future he'd imagined for me? "You're quiet tonight," Alana Mom observed. "Just thinking about some new procedures we're implementing at the clinic," I lied smoothly. Dad barely looked up from his plate. "Speaking of work, don't forget Sunday's deadline." "I haven't forgotten," I replied, meeting his eyes steadily. "Good. Jake and I are meeting with my financial advisor tomorrow about his business school path." Dad turned to Jake. "Son, this is the kind of practical education that matters. Not like some careers where you just follow instructions and punch a clock." The dig at my nursing career choice was obvious, but for once it didn't sting. Nothing he said could hurt me anymore. I had seen the truth and I was choosing freedom. After dinner, I finalized my packing list and quietly confirmed details with Mrs. Perez. I would move in Saturday morning, a day before Dad's rent deadline. Later, I sat on my bed and wrote a new email to the Seattle program, explaining the situation and asking if there might still be opportunities available. It was a long shot, but I had nothing to lose by trying. As I prepared for bed, I felt a strange combination of grief and liberation. The family I'd tried so hard to please, to be good enough for, had never really seen me. But now I was seeing myself clearly for the first time in years, and that clarity would guide me forward. Saturday arrived with a golden summer sunrise. I'd barely slept, running through mental checklists and second-guessing my decision. But each time doubt crept in, I remembered the acceptance letter, the "because he's worth it" statement, the years of inequality, wrapped in the thin veneer of family. I spent the day moving methodically through my normal routine. Breakfast with the family, a trip to the grocery store with Mom, avoiding Dad's study where he and Jake were having another future business leader mentoring session. "We're having steaks tonight," Mom announced as we unpacked groceries. "Your father wanted something special." I nodded, not mentioning that I wouldn't be there for dinner. It felt surreal to be having this mundane conversation, knowing everything would change in a few hours. By late afternoon, I had everything prepared. 3 suitcases hidden in the back of my closet contained my essential belongings. My new apartment keys were secured in my purse. The acceptance letter from Seattle was tucked safely in my document folder. When everyone was busy with dinner preparations, I made a final sweep of my room, checking drawers and shelves for anything important I might have missed. Under my bed, I found an old photo album I'd forgotten about. Flipping through it brought a wave of complicated emotions. Childhood photos showing a family that looked normal from the outside. Dad teaching Jake to ride a bike. Mom braiding my hair. Holiday gatherings and birthday parties. Had there ever been a time when things were truly equal? Or had I just been too young to notice the disparities? I closed the album and added it to my suitcase. Whatever the truth, these were still my memories, my history. As the house filled with the aroma of grilling steaks, I begged off dinner, claiming a migraine. No one questioned it much. Dad was focused on some business story he was telling Jake, and Mom just looked concerned and brought me some pain relievers. "Rest up, sweetie. Feel better," she said, closing my bedroom door. I waited, listening to the sounds of the family dinner proceeding without me. Clinking glasses, conversation, laughter. It struck me how easily they carried on in my absence, how little my presence or absence affected the family dynamic. Around 10, the house finally quieted. Dad and Jake had gone to their rooms, and Mom was watching her usual late-night show in the living room. I changed into jeans and a t-shirt, silently pulled my suitcases from the closet, and waited for midnight when Mom would finally go to bed. At 12:30, the house was completely silent. I carefully opened my bedroom door, listening for any movement. Nothing. I began moving my suitcases one by one to my car, parked in the driveway, thankful for the WD-40 I'd sprayed on the front door hinges earlier that week. After loading the car, I returned to the kitchen to leave my note. I drafted and redrafted it a dozen times, trying to strike the right balance between explanation and boundary setting. The final version was clear, but not cruel. I've moved out. I will not be paying rent or returning to live here. This decision isn't made lightly, but recent events have made it clear my place in this family is conditional in ways Jake's never has been. I need to build a life where I'm valued for who I am. Please don't try to find me. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Alana. I placed the note on the refrigerator, securing it with a magnet where it would be seen first thing in the morning. Then I took one last look around the kitchen, the room where I'd prepared countless family meals, done homework at the table, listened to Dad praise Jake's accomplishments while my own went unacknowledged. As I turned to leave, a floorboard creaked behind me. I whirled around to find Mom standing in the doorway, her eyes moving from me to my car keys in hand to the note on the refrigerator. "You're leaving," she said. Not a question. I nodded, bracing for resistance arguments. Emotional manipulation. Instead, Mom walked to the bookshelf in the living room, removed a decorative wooden box, and returned to the kitchen. She opened it and pulled out an envelope. "I've been saving this for you," she whispered, handing it to me. "A little at a time over the years. $3,000. It's not much, but—" I opened the envelope to see neatly stacked bills. "Mom, I can't take this," I whispered. "You can and you will," she said firmly, an unusual steel in her voice. "I should have done more, said more, been stronger for you. This doesn't make up for it, but it might help you get started." I stared at her, seeing her clearly, perhaps for the first time. Not just as my passive mother who enabled Dad's favoritism, but as a woman who had made her own quiet calculations and compromises. "Did you know about the Seattle program?" I asked. The acceptance letter that disappeared. A flash of genuine confusion crossed her face. "What program? What letter?" "Never mind," I said, realizing she hadn't been part of that particular betrayal. "Why didn't you ever say anything about how differently Dad treats us?" Mom sighed, suddenly looking older in the dim kitchen light. "I thought if I pushed too hard, he might make things even worse for you. I thought I was protecting you by keeping the peace." She shook her head. "Maybe I was just protecting myself. It was easier to go along than to fight." I felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. "I have to go, Mom." "I know," she said, surprising me again. "But promise, you'll let me know you're safe, that you have somewhere to stay." "I promise." She pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm sorry I wasn't stronger," she whispered. I hugged her back, a complex mixture of love, hurt, and forgiveness washing through me. Then I stepped away, tucking the envelope into my purse. "Don't tell them where I've gone," I said. "Not until I'm ready." Mom nodded. "Be safe. Be strong." I walked out the door without looking back, started my car, and drove toward my new apartment and my new life. As the familiar streets of my neighborhood receded in the rearview mirror, I felt a weight lifting. For the first time in my adult life, I was making a choice based solely on what I needed, not on seeking approval that would never come. The night air coming through my open window felt like possibility. I had no illusions that this would be easy. But for the first time in years, I was moving towards something rather than just enduring what was. 3 months passed in a blur of work shifts, classes, and adjusting to independent living. My tiny apartment above Mrs. Perez's garage became a sanctuary, the first space that was truly mine, decorated with secondhand furniture and simple touches that made it home. The first week after leaving was chaos. My phone exploded with notifications, missed calls, voicemails, texts. Dad's messages quickly evolved from demanding, "Come home immediately," and "explain yourself," to threatening. "You'll regret walking away from your family like this," to dismissive. "If this is the thanks we get for everything we've done for you, maybe it's better you're gone." Jake's texts were different. Confused, hurt, with an undercurrent of genuine concern. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "Dad's furious. Please, just let someone know you're safe." Mom kept her promise. She texted simply, "I told them, I don't know where you are. Call when you can." When I did call, she listened more than spoke, asking about my new place, my job, my classes. She never pushed me to return or make amends with Dad. I threw myself into building my new life with the same determination I'd once used, trying to earn my father's approval. I picked up every extra shift offered at the clinic. I rearranged my class schedule to accommodate my work hours. I learned to stretch my grocery budget, cook inexpensive meals, find free activities when I needed a break. Mrs. Perez became an unexpected ally, occasionally bringing up homemade enchiladas or offering rides when my old car had mechanical issues. My son was just like you, she'd say, working so hard for his dream. Now he's a doctor in Chicago. You'll get there too. 6 weeks after I left home, I received an email that changed everything. The Seattle Grace Nursing Excellence Program had a spot open for the winter semester starting in January. If I was still interested, the scholarship and stipend were mine. I would need to finalize my transfer credits and move to Seattle by December 15th. I accepted immediately, then spent the next day in a daze, alternating between excitement and terror. Seattle was across the country. I knew no one there. But the opportunity was everything I'd worked for. Advanced training connections with top medical facilities, and most importantly, a future, limited only by my own abilities, not by someone else's assessment of my worth. I began planning the move, calculating costs, researching neighborhoods in Seattle. I picked up even more hours at work building my savings for the cross-country journey. The scholarship would cover tuition and provide a housing stipend, but I'd need startup money for deposits, furniture, winter clothes, appropriate for the Pacific Northwest. I shared the news with Mom during one of our weekly calls. Her joy seemed genuine, though tinged with sadness at the increased distance that would soon separate us. "I'm so proud of you, Alana," she said, her voice catching. "You've always been stronger than anyone gave you credit for." "Even you?" I asked gently. "Especially me," she admitted. "I've been thinking a lot about the example I set for you, staying quiet when I should have spoken up. I don't want that for you." It was the most self-aware I'd ever heard her be, and it sparked a deeper conversation about her relationship with Dad, her own compromises, the family dynamics I'd never fully understood as a child. "Has Dad said anything about me?" I finally asked, hating that I still cared enough to wonder. Mom hesitated. "He tells people you're going through some personal issues, that you needed space to sort things out." The euphemism made me laugh harshly. "That's one way to put it." "Jake asks about you," she added. "I think he misses you, though he wouldn't say that in front of your father." Jake, my brother, who had benefited from Dad's favoritism his entire life without ever acknowledging it. I had complex feelings about him. Resentment, mixed with the understanding that he hadn't created the dynamic, just lived within it. Still, he had never stood up for me, never questioned the disparity in how we were treated. 2 months after leaving home, I was working a night shift at the clinic when the receptionist called back to the nurse's station. "Alana, there's someone asking for you at the front desk. Says he's your brother." My heart rate doubled instantly. "I'm not available," I replied automatically. "He says he'll wait until your shift ends." Seems pretty determined. I finished my rounds, mind racing. How had Jake found me? I hadn't told anyone at work about my family situation beyond the vaguest details. I'd changed my phone number, created new social media accounts, taken every precaution to maintain my privacy. When my shift ended at 7 in the morning, I walked cautiously to the waiting area. Jake sat slumped in a chair, looking like he hadn't slept. He jumped up when he saw me. "Alana, thank God. We've been so worried." "We or Mom?" I asked coolly, keeping distance between us. "All of us," he insisted, then faltered under my skeptical look. "Okay, mostly Mom and me. Dad's been..." He trailed off. "Been what, his usual charming self?" "He's been difficult," Jake admitted. "But he's under a lot of pressure. The business isn't doing well, and with you gone..." Don't I cut him off? Don't make this my fault or my problem. "How did you find me anyway?" Jake had the grace to look embarrassed. "I remembered you mentioned your supervisor, Jeanette, a few times. I called every medical clinic in the county asking for her until I found the right one." I sighed, too tired after a 12-hour shift to maintain my anger. "What do you want, Jake? Can we go somewhere and talk? Please." We ended up at a 24-hour diner near the clinic. Jake ordered a full breakfast while I nursed a coffee waiting. "Dad's business is in trouble," he finally said. "Serious trouble. I only found out after you left. He's been making bad investments for years, covering losses with new loans." I shrugged. "That's unfortunate, but it has nothing to do with me." "There's more," Jake continued. Remember how he always said the family couldn't afford your college, that we didn't have the money for both of us? He looked down at his plate. He was using your college fund money to prop up his failing investments. For years. Though I'd suspected something like this, hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the stomach. How do you know this? He's been trying to access your trust from Grandma, the one that matures when you turn 25. He can't touch it without your signature, and he's been getting desperate. Our grandmother had set up small trusts for both of us before she died. I'd almost forgotten about mine. So that's why you're here, Dad sent you. To get me to sign over my trust. No. Jake looked genuinely horrified. I came because I found out what he's been doing. I came to warn you to make sure you don't sign anything he sends, and to apologize. For what specifically, I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Jake pushed his food away untouched. For benefiting from how he treated you. For never saying anything. For accepting the car, the college fund, all of it knowing you weren't getting the same. He looked up and I was surprised to see tears in his eyes. I always knew it wasn't fair, but it was easier to stay quiet. I was afraid if I spoke up he'd turn on me too. The admission hung between us. It wasn't enough to make up for years of inequality, but it was more self-awareness than I'd expected from him. There's something else, Jake said hesitantly. Dad's been telling people you left because you're having mental health issues. He's told the extended family you had some kind of breakdown, that you're not thinking clearly. He's setting it up so if you ever say anything about how he treated you, people will think you're just unstable and imagining things. A chill ran through me. It was calculated, manipulative, and exactly the kind of thing Dad would do to maintain control of the narrative. Why are you telling me this? I asked Jake. What do you want? I want to make things right, or at least not keep making them worse. He pushed a slip of paper across the table. This is my new cell number. Dad doesn't know about it. If you ever need anything or just want to talk. I took the paper, not committing to anything but not refusing either. I'm transferring schools, Jake added. State business program instead of the private university Dad wanted. I got a part-time job. I'm trying to stand on my own like you did. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to reject any reconciliation. He had been complicit in my mistreatment for years. But another part recognized he had been manipulated too, just in a different way. I'm moving to Seattle in December, I found myself saying. Nursing Excellence Program. Full scholarship. Jake's face lit up with genuine happiness for me. That's amazing. You always wanted to do something like that. We parted awkwardly, neither of us quite sure where we stood with each other. But as I watched him walk away, I felt something shift inside me. The anger and resentment weren't gone, but they had lost some of their sharp edges. That night in my apartment, I looked around at the life I'd built in just 3 months. Modest, but mine chosen by me, built on my terms. I thought about Seattle, about the opportunities waiting there, about the person I was becoming away from my father's diminishing influence. For the first time, I truly understood that walking away hadn't been about escape. It had been about claiming the life I deserved, and no one could take that from me again. 6 months after leaving home, Seattle had become my reality. My apartment in the University District was small, but comfortable, with a view of distant mountains on clear days. My program at Seattle Grace was challenging and exhilarating. I'd made friends among my fellow nursing students, joined a study group, even started dating occasionally. I kept in touch with Mom through weekly calls, and Jake through occasional texts. He had followed through on his promise to transfer schools and get a job, sending me updates on his progress. Dad remained a shadow figure in these conversations, present in the background but never directly addressed. I was finishing a clinical rotation one evening when my phone rang, with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Alana, it's your father. His voice, so unexpected, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I stepped into an empty break room, heart pounding. How did you get this number? I asked, voice steady despite my racing pulse. Your mother, he replied. Don't be angry with her. I wore her down. Typical. He probably made her life miserable until she gave in. What do you want? We need to talk. In person. His tone was all business, as if arranging a meeting with a client. I'm flying to Seattle tomorrow. I'll be at the Marriott downtown. I have no interest in meeting with you, I replied. This concerns your future, your education. It's important. My future is doing just fine, without your input. He sighed, that familiar sound of disappointment I'd heard my whole life. Dinner tomorrow, 7 o'clock. The hotel restaurant. Just hear me out. Before I could refuse again, he continued, if you don't show up, I'll come to your school. I know which program you're in. I'll wait outside your classes if I have to. The threat was clear: make this meeting private, or he'd make a scene in the one place I'd built a reputation free from family drama. Fine. 7 o'clock. 1 hour, no more. After hanging up, I called Mom, not bothering to hide my anger. You gave Dad my number. I'm sorry, Alana, she said, sounding exhausted. He's been impossible since Jake moved to his own apartment. I just couldn't take the fighting anymore. Jake moved out. This was news. 2 weeks ago. He said he needed to be independent, that he was inspired by you. Your father didn't take it well. I processed this information, understanding better why Dad had suddenly tracked me down. With both his children rejecting his control, he was looking to reassert it wherever he could. Did he say why he's coming to Seattle? He says he wants to reconcile, but... Mom hesitated. Be careful, Alana. He's not in a good place. The business is worse than ever. The next evening I dressed carefully for the meeting. Professional, polished, nothing Dad could criticize. I arrived at the hotel restaurant exactly at 7, refusing to give him the satisfaction of my being either early or late. He was already seated studying the wine list with the intensity he usually reserved for investment reports. He looked older than I, remembered the lines around his eyes deeper, his hair grayer. Alana, he said, standing as I approached. He moved as if to hug me, but I remained out of reach, and he awkwardly settled for gesturing to the chair opposite him. You look well. Let's skip the small talk, I replied, sitting down. Why are you here? A server appeared to take drink orders. Dad requested an expensive scotch. I asked for water. Still sensible, Dad remarked after the server left. That's good. I've always respected your practicality. Respected, I repeated. That's not the word I would use for how you treated me. Dad's expression tightened momentarily before he forced a smile. I know we've had our differences. That's why I'm here, to put things right between us. By put things right, do you mean apologize for years of favoritism, for hiding my acceptance letter to Seattle, for using my college fund for your business? His eyes widened slightly at the last accusation, confirming Jake's revelation. Family dynamics are complicated, he said dismissively. I made decisions I thought were in everyone's best interest. Maybe some were mistakes. But I'm here to focus on the future, not dwell on the past. Our drinks arrived, giving Dad a moment to compose himself. He took a long sip of scotch before continuing. I've been thinking about your nursing career. It's more substantial than I initially gave it credit for. This program you're in, it's quite prestigious. Yes, it is. The program I got into months earlier than I actually started because someone intercepted my acceptance letter. I held his gaze steadily. Dad had the grace to look uncomfortable. A misunderstanding. Stealing my mail isn't a misunderstanding. It's a federal offense. Alana, please, Dad said, lowering his voice. I'm trying to make amends. In fact, I have a proposal that could benefit us both. Here it was, the real reason for his visit. I'm prepared to help with your remaining education expenses. Pay off any loans you've taken. Set you up properly so you can focus on your studies without financial worry. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that drew glances from nearby tables. In exchange for what? Your grandmother's trust fund matures when you turn 25. It's a substantial amount, more than you might realize. If you were to assign it to the family business now, I could use it to secure new investors. In return, I'll cover all your current expenses. So you want me to sign over my future financial security to bail out your failing business, after you already misappropriated my college fund. Dad's facade of paternal concern slipped, revealing the businessman beneath. It's not misappropriation when it's family. Everything I did was to build something for our future. For Jake's future. For your future. No, I corrected. Everything you did was for Jake's future and your ego. I was just a convenient source of funds and free domestic labor. That's not fair, Dad snapped, forgetting to keep his voice down. I kept a roof over your head, food on the table, and charged me rent for the privilege while giving Jake a free ride. I finished. The answer is no. I'm not signing over my trust fund. Dad's expression hardened. You always were stubborn, just like your Aunt Patricia. The name caught me off guard. Aunt Patricia. Your sister, you always said she cut contact with the family because she was selfish and unstable. She was difficult, ungrateful, refused to contribute to the family business when our father needed capital. Dad drained his scotch. She chose a nursing career too, coincidentally. Must run in the women of the family. This misguided independence. A missing puzzle piece clicked into place. When did you last speak to her? 20 years ago, maybe longer. She's in Oregon somewhere, living her authentic life, or whatever she calls it. His tone dripped with disdain. I reached into my bag and removed a folder, placing it on the table between us. 3 months ago, I found Aunt Patricia. It wasn't hard. She's the director of nursing at Portland Memorial Hospital. We've been in regular contact since then. Dad stared at the folder, his face paling slightly. She told me everything, I continued. How your father favored you as the son just like you favored Jake. How she worked through college while your education was paid for. How when your father's business struggled, he demanded she contribute her savings. Just like you're trying to do with my trust fund now. I opened the folder, revealing copies of documents Patricia had shared with me. She also kept records, detailed ones, about family finances, about the pattern of favoritism, about her inheritance that mysteriously disappeared after your father died. Those are family matters, Dad said stiffly. Private. Yes, they are. And I've learned a lot from them about how history repeats itself. I closed the folder. I've also learned how to break the cycle. I stood up, gathering my belongings. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you except the acknowledgement that what you did was wrong. Not just to me, but to Mom, to Jake in his own way, and to Aunt Patricia years ago. Dad remained, seated, his knuckles white around his empty glass. So that's it. You're throwing away your family based on some old grievances from a bitter woman. I'm not throwing away family. I'm choosing which family relationships are healthy enough to maintain. Mom and I talk weekly. Jake and I are rebuilding our relationship on more equal terms. I've gained an aunt who understands exactly what I've experienced. The only relationship I'm reevaluating is the one with you. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, and fear perhaps at the realization he was losing control, not just of me, but of the entire family narrative. Your business problems are your own to solve, I said, softening my tone slightly. But if you ever want a relationship with me again, it starts with honesty and ends with respect. I won't accept anything less. As I walked away, Dad called after me. This isn't over, Alana. Families don't work this way. I paused, turning back to face him one last time. Healthy ones do. Outside in the cool Seattle evening, I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in months. The confrontation I'd feared for so long was over, and I had remained true to myself throughout. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. How did it go? I smiled, typing back. Exactly as we discussed. I stood my ground. Her reply came quickly. Never doubted you would. Family dinner at my place this weekend to celebrate. By family, she meant herself, her wife, Linda, and me. The new family configuration we were building based on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. Wouldn't miss it. I replied, walking toward the bus stop with my head high, leaving behind the weight of expectations I'd never asked for and approval I no longer needed. 1 year after walking away from my childhood home, life had taken on a rhythm that felt both challenging and right. My program at Seattle Grace was even more demanding than I'd anticipated, but the difficulty only confirmed I was where I belonged. I'd made the dean's list, both semesters secured a competitive summer internship at Swedish Medical Center, and found my specialty interest in trauma nursing. My tiny apartment had become a true home, decorated with secondhand furniture plants that somehow thrived despite my irregular schedule, and photos of the people who mattered. Mom. During her visit last spring, Jake at his new job, Patricia and Linda, at their garden party, new friends from my program. Mom had found her voice in unexpected ways over the past year. After decades of keeping the peace at her own expense, she'd started therapy and was considering a trial separation from Dad. Our weekly calls had evolved from me reassuring her that I was okay to genuine conversations about her newly rediscovered interests and growing independence. I'm taking an art class, she told me during one call. I used to love painting before I got married. Did you know that? I hadn't known, which sparked a whole new dimension to our relationship, discovering the woman my mother was beyond her roles as wife and mother. Jake had made perhaps the most surprising transformation. After transferring to State University, he'd discovered a passion for sustainable business practices that Dad had always dismissed as hippie nonsense. He'd moved to Seattle 3 months ago, partly to be closer to me, and partly for an internship with a green technology startup. Our relationship was still healing, marked by occasional awkward silences and unintentional triggers of old hurts. But we were building something new on the ruins of our childhood dynamic, a sibling relationship based on choice rather than circumstance. Dad remained on the periphery of my life. After his failed attempt to access my trust fund, he'd stopped direct contact. According to Mom, the business had finally entered bankruptcy proceedings, forcing Dad to sell the family home and move to a condo. His carefully constructed image of success had crumbled, leaving him to reckon with the consequences of his choices. I felt neither joy nor sorrow at his downfall, just a calm certainty that karmic wheels turn in their own time. The morning of my nursing school honors ceremony dawned bright and clear. The program recognized exceptional first-year students, and my clinical supervisor had nominated me for the Excellence in Emergency Care Award. Patricia and Linda were driving up from Portland to attend along with Jake and 2 close friends from my cohort. I dressed carefully in a navy blue dress and comfortable heels, checking my reflection with a sense of quiet pride. The woman looking back at me had changed substantially from the one who had slipped out of her family home in the middle of the night a year ago. My eyes were clearer, my posture straighter, my smile more genuine. The ceremony was being held in the university's historic Kane Hall, with its soaring ceilings and polished wood panels. I arrived early, joining my fellow nominees in the preparation room, where we received instructions and pinned on our name badges. Nervous, asked Maya, my study group partner, who was up for the Research Innovation Award. A little, I admitted, but mostly just grateful to be here. As we filed into the auditorium, I scanned the audience for familiar faces. Jake was easy to spot his height, making him stand out as he saved seats near the front. Patricia and Linda sat beside him, Patricia waving enthusiastically when she caught my eye. My friends from the program were scattered throughout the crowd, many giving thumbs-up signals as I passed. And then I saw him, 3rd row far left, my father. He hadn't been invited, hadn't called to say he was coming. Yet, there he sat looking older and somewhat diminished in a suit that seemed slightly too large, as if he'd lost weight since I'd seen him last. A flutter of anxiety rippled through me, followed by a calm certainty. His presence couldn't diminish this moment unless I allowed it to. This day wasn't about him, or our complicated history. It was about celebrating what I had accomplished on my own terms. The ceremony proceeded with speeches from faculty and hospital administrators, followed by the awards. When my name was called for Excellence in Emergency Care, the applause from my small, cheering section was disproportionately loud, with Jake's voice rising above the rest. I accepted the certificate and small scholarship check with genuine gratitude, using my brief moment at the microphone to thank my mentors and supportive peers. The reception afterward was held in the adjacent atrium, with light refreshments and opportunities for networking with hospital representatives. I moved through the crowd accepting congratulations, introducing Patricia and Linda to my instructors, watching Jake charm everyone as he always had, but now with an authenticity that had been missing before. I was speaking with my clinical supervisor when I felt a presence at my elbow. I turned to find my father standing there looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Congratulations, Alana," he said, offering a small gift bag I hadn't noticed him carrying. Your achievement today is impressive. The compliment delivered without qualification or comparison was so unprecedented that for a moment I couldn't respond. Thank you for coming. I finally managed not taking the bag yet. I didn't expect to see you here. Your mother told me about it, he explained. I flew in this morning. I'll be heading back tonight. An awkward silence fell between us. From across the room, I could see Jake watching us, tensely ready to intervene if needed. Patricia had also noticed and was moving casually in our direction. The business is gone, Dad said abruptly. Bankruptcy finalized last month. The house, too. Mom mentioned that. I'm sorry it came to that. He shook his head. Don't be. It needed to happen. I needed to. He trailed off, seemingly struggling with unfamiliar territory. I needed to lose everything I thought mattered to figure out what actually does. It was perhaps the most self-aware statement I'd ever heard him make. I've been seeing someone, he continued. A therapist, I mean. Not voluntarily at first, part of the bankruptcy proceedings, financial counseling. But it's become more than that. I nodded, unsure where this was heading. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Dad said finally, meeting my eyes directly. I don't have the right to ask for that. What I did to you, to Patricia, before you even to Jake in a different way. It was wrong. All of it. The admission hung in the air between us, something I had never expected to hear from this proud, stubborn man. I'm trying to understand why I repeated my father's patterns when I hated them so much growing up, he continued. It's not an excuse, just something I'm working on. He held out the gift bag again. This isn't a bribe or an attempt to buy your goodwill. It's just something that belongs to you. Cautiously, I accepted it, opening it to find an old, leather-bound book. My grandmother's journal, with its distinctive, monogrammed cover. She left this specifically for you in her will, Dad said quietly. I kept it back when you were younger, telling myself you weren't ready for it. The truth is, I wasn't ready for you to read her thoughts about family patterns, about how she saw history repeating itself. I ran my fingers over the worn leather, understanding the significance of this gesture. Not just the return of something rightfully mine, but an acknowledgement of the deliberate withholding. I don't expect this changes anything between us, Dad added. I just wanted to be here today to see what you've accomplished despite my failures as a father, and to tell you that you were always worth it, Alana. I was too blind to see it. Before I could formulate a response, he nodded once and stepped back. I should let you get back to your celebration. Congratulations again. You've earned this. I watched him walk away, shoulders slightly stooped, no longer the towering figure who had shaped so much of my self-perception. He stopped briefly to shake Jake's hand awkwardly, before continuing toward the exit. Patricia appeared at my side, her gaze following Dad's departing figure. You okay? I think so, I replied, surprised to find it was true. He apologized. Actually apologized. Wonders never cease, Patricia murmured. Do you believe him? I considered the question carefully. I believe he's starting to understand what he did wrong. I don't know if that translates to lasting change. And you don't have to figure that out today, Patricia reminded me, squeezing my shoulder. Or ever, if you don't want to. Your relationship with him going forward is entirely on your terms. The reception continued around us, celebrating achievement and possibility. Jake joined us, eyebrows raised in silent question. Dad apologized, I told him. For everything. Jake's eyes widened. That's unprecedented. People can surprise you, Patricia observed. Sometimes even themselves. Later that evening, our small, chosen family gathered at my favorite restaurant to continue the celebration. As I looked around the table at these people who supported me for who I was, rather than what they wanted me to be, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey from that devastating dinner a year ago to this moment had been difficult, painful at times, but ultimately transformative. I had discovered strengths I never knew. I possessed built boundaries I'd never thought possible, and created a life aligned with my own values rather than someone else's expectations. My father's words echoed in my mind. You were always worth it. The validation I'd spent so many years seeking from him no longer held the power it once did. I had learned to recognize my own worth, independent of his assessment, to build a life on the foundation of that self-knowledge rather than external approval. As glasses were raised in a toast to the award recipients, I added my own silent acknowledgement to the scared but determined young woman who had packed her bags and left a note on the refrigerator, taking the first step on this journey. She could never have imagined where that courage would lead, how complete the transformation would be. The future stretched before me, full of possibility and choice, nursing career paths, to explore relationships, to nurture perhaps even a measured reconnection with my father on new, healthier terms. Whatever came next, I would face it knowing my worth wasn't determined by someone else's assessment, but by the strength I'd found within myself. Some bridges once burned truly do light the way forward. What painful family dynamics have you had to overcome in your life? How did you find the strength to set boundaries and build a life on your own terms? Comment below and share your story. Your experience might help someone else find their courage. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might need to hear this message of hope and transformation. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by the strength you discover when you finally decide to value yourself.